The Dreamcast had online multiplayer before consoles were expected to go online. It had a built-in modem, a visual memory unit, arcade-perfect games, and ideas that would later become normal across the industry. Yet less than 3 years after launch, Sega stopped making consoles forever. So how did a machine this forward-thinking collapse so quickly? The answer was not one fatal mistake. It was timing, debt, and the incoming shadow of the PlayStation 2. By the time Sega began planning its next console, the company was already carrying the damage of the Saturn era. The Saturn had launched in confusion, arriving early in North America with limited warning to retailers, developers, and even parts of Sega's own business. Its hardware was powerful, but difficult to develop for, with a complex multiprocessor design that made games harder and more expensive to build. That mattered because Sony had entered the market with a cleaner message. The PlayStation was easier to program, cheaper to produce for, and backed by aggressive marketing that made Sega look out of step. Nintendo still had its loyal audience, but Sony had taken the momentum Sega badly needed. So the Dreamcast could not feel like a Saturn sequel. Sega needed a clean break, a new name, a new design, and a console that developers could understand quickly. It had to look modern, sound simple, and convince players that Sega had learned from its mistakes. Inside the company, the pressure was enormous. This was not just a product launch. It was a rescue mission for Sega's hardware business. If the Dreamcast failed, Sega might not get another chance to compete from the living room. And for a brief moment, that rescue mission looked like it might actually work. The Dreamcast was about to launch with speed, confidence, and a lineup strong enough to make people believe Sega was back. September 9th, 1999 became the kind of launch date companies dream of owning. Sega priced the Dreamcast at $199, putting it within reach of players who wanted something new without paying personal computer prices. The date itself, 9/9/99, was easy to remember, easy to market, and impossible to miss in game magazines, television ads, and store displays. The campaign around it was strange in exactly the right way. Its thinking made the Dreamcast feel less like another plastic box and more like a machine with intelligence behind it. The ads were fast, confident, and slightly mysterious, selling the idea that Sega had built a console that could react, connect, and surprise you. On launch day in the United States, the Dreamcast arrived with 18 games, a huge lineup for a new system. Players could pick up arcade-style showcases like Soul Calibur, NFL 2K, Sonic Adventure, Ready 2 Rumble Boxing, and Power Stone. It did not feel like a console waiting for its library to arrive. It felt ready on day one. That mattered because the Dreamcast made home gaming feel sharper and faster. Its visuals were clean, its controller had the screen-equipped visual memory unit, and its games carried the energy of Sega's arcade roots. For players used to older three-dimensional graphics, this looked like the next generation had arrived early. The numbers matched the excitement. Sega reportedly brought in roughly $97 million in first-day sales in North America. For a company still trying to escape the shadow of the Saturn, that was a real comeback signal. For that moment, Sega looked alive again. The Dreamcast had the price, the games, the marketing, and the momentum. So if the launch was this strong, what was hiding underneath the success? Underneath that success was a machine trying to pull console gaming into a connected future before the rest of the industry was ready. Every Dreamcast shipped with a built-in modem. That mattered because online play was not treated like an expensive add-on or a strange personal computer feature. Sega put the hardware in the box and told players that a console could go beyond the living room. The Dreamcast could browse the web, send email, download extra content, and connect certain games to online features. The visual memory unit added another layer. It was a memory card with a screen, buttons, and tiny standalone games, letting players carry pieces of a game outside the console itself. Developers used those ideas in different ways. Sonic Adventure let players raise, chow, and interact with them through the visual memory unit. Other games experimented with downloadable extras, data transfers, and connected features that made the system feel alive after the disc was already in your hands. Then came Phantasy Star Online, one of the clearest examples of what Sega was chasing. Console players could team up with strangers, explore dungeons together, and communicate online in a way that felt genuinely new. This was before Xbox Live made online console identity feel normal. The games around it gave the future personality. Soul Calibur looked impossibly polished. Crazy Taxi turned arcade chaos into a home obsession. Jet Set Radio mixed cel-shaded art, music, and style into something no other console had. Shenmue tried to simulate daily life with a level of ambition that still feels absurd. The Dreamcast was not just powerful, it was early, and in the console business, being early can look exactly like being ahead, until the market proves how dangerous that position really is. Then Sony changed the calendar. The Dreamcast was already on shelves, already impressive, and already building a library. But Sony did not need the PlayStation 2 to be available everywhere to hurt Sega. It only needed people to believe it was worth waiting for. Sony had enormous trust from the original PlayStation. Millions of players had bought into that brand, and publishers had made serious money on it. When Sony started talking talking about its next console, the message was simple. The real next generation was coming soon. That created a problem Sega could not easily solve. A customer standing in a store could buy a Dreamcast right now, or hold their money for the PlayStation 2. For a company in Sega's position, hesitation was dangerous. Every delayed purchase meant fewer consoles sold, fewer games attached, and less proof that the Dreamcast was a safe bet. The PlayStation 2 also had one feature that reached beyond games. It played digital versatile discs. At the time, digital versatile disc players were still expensive, and movies on digital versatile disc were becoming the new standard for home entertainment. Sony was selling a game console that could also become the family movie machine. That changed the value argument completely. Parents could justify it. Movie fans wanted it. Gamers saw it as future-proof. The PlayStation 2 was not just competing for shelf space with the Dreamcast. It was competing for the center of the living room. Third-party publishers noticed where the momentum was going. Sega needed outside support to survive, but Sony offered a larger audience, stronger retail confidence, and the promise of a massive install base. Developers still made great Dreamcast games, but the industry's long-term bets were shifting. By the time the PlayStation 2 arrived, Sega was not simply fighting another console. It was fighting Sony's money, Sony's reputation, Sony's marketing machine, and a public that had already decided where the future was supposed to be. Sega's biggest problem was not that the Dreamcast failed to impress people. It was that Sega was running out of room to make mistakes. The company entered the Dreamcast era already weakened by years of expensive hardware bets, damaged consumer trust, and uneven performance across different markets. Sony could afford to play a long game, spend heavily, and absorb losses while building dominance. Sega needed the Dreamcast to work quickly. That pressure showed up in every part of the business. Hardware had to be priced aggressively, but the console still cost money to build, market, ship, and support. Every unit sold did not magically fix the balance sheet. Sega needed strong software sales, steady third-party support, and retailers willing to keep pushing the machine. Piracy made that harder. The Dreamcast became known for being unusually easy to copy games for, especially compared with what console makers wanted from a controlled software market. Piracy was not the single reason the system collapsed, but it hurt the machine's image and weakened confidence in its software ecosystem. Developers and retailers could read the situation. If customers were waiting for the PlayStation 2, stores ordered more Sony stock. If stores gave the Dreamcast less space, customers saw it as less important. If publishers expected smaller returns, they shifted teams and budgets elsewhere. That became the trap. The Dreamcast still had fans, great games, and technical strengths, but Sega needed more than admiration. It needed a business that could survive the cost of competing. The grim reality was simple. The Dreamcast did not need to be unpopular to become unsustainable. In 2001, Sega made the decision that ended an era. The Dreamcast was discontinued, and Sega left the console hardware business completely. For fans, it was more than a product being cancelled. Sega had been one of the defining rivals of video games. The company that challenged Nintendo, traded blows with Sony, and built its identity around speed, attitude, and risk. Now that company was stepping out of the console war. The choice was painful, but it was not reckless. Sega could keep fighting a battle it no longer had the money to fund, or it could survive by becoming a software company. It chose survival. That shift changed gaming history. Sonic, Shenmue, Virtua Fighter, and other Sega properties could now appear on rival machines. The old wall between Sega and everyone else came down. The Dreamcast died as a business, but its ideas did not. They were about to spread everywhere. The Dreamcast failed because it arrived too early against the wrong giant. Online play, downloadable ideas, connected communities, and fearless game design became the future, just not soon enough to save Sega's hardware. Thanks for watching. In the comments, tell me which Dreamcast game or feature deserved more recognition.